everyone. I am Dr. Monique Smith Gadson with Transforming Visions Counseling and Consulting Services, where we are all about relationships, building, developing, strengthening, and restoring relationships. That is what we do. You can follow us on Twitter and on Instagram and Facebook. We also have a YouTube channel, so you can go there and subscribe for our upcoming videos. And also, we have a website that is under construction, so I'll definitely keep you informed as to when that is completed. But thank you so much for coming to my YouTube channel on today. I am going to do a segment, and the church said, and this is where I've talked about beforehand, where there are conversations that we might not necessarily be having in church, that it involves church, and it would be one of the things that I've seen people and heard people talk about. This is a conversation we need to have in church. So this is a segment that I do that talks about in the church said, where we bring some of this conversation to light, and we talk about some of those subjects that might not necessarily be discussed in church. A few weeks ago, I was on the Jude 3 podcast by Lisa Fields talking about church hurt. And one of the things that I talked about there was the woman in the Bible with the issue of blood. And I read a lot of comments. I had gone back and followed the hashtag church2 and just read a lot of different people's experiences. And so I felt compelled to come and just do a video on church hurt and kind of go back and look at that passage surrounding the woman with the issue of blood, and just thinking about how we can take this and how we can apply it to our lives today, especially those who are victims of church hurt. I just want to say, first and foremost, I am a victim of church hurt. If in the day that I endured it at the most, which would be the days that I grew up being a pastor's daughter, we didn't have a social media campaign. We didn't have hashtags in that day. But if we did, I definitely would be hashtagging church hurt, because I truly have been afflicted at the hands of church people. Sometimes it was very intentional, and maybe there are other times that it was unintentional. It could very well have been that I was more sensitive due to the fact that I had been hurt so many times beforehand, and I might have been a little more hypersensitive. And then it would be where some people may not have intentionally tried to be hurtful, but due to my hypersensitivity, it very well was experienced like so. Nonetheless, I did want to talk to those today who have been or who are victims of church hurt. Now, I'm going to preface this conversation with saying, you know how you go to an amusement park or a different country or a different city, and you're doing sightseeing, and you try to take in as much as you can, but you may not be able to see everything that this particular adventure could offer you. I just want to say concerning this talk, I know that there are numerous angles, numerous perspectives that I can discuss. However, Rome has not been built in a day. And therefore, we can't talk about everything in just one video sitting. So I just want to say that I'm talking about just one aspect of church hurt, one passage of the Bible, and just really looking at this particular passage surrounding the woman who dealt with the issue of blood, and seeing if we can put ourselves in her shoes, those of us who have been victimized and have or are victims of church hurt, and just see what are some lessons that we can pull from her experience and how we can apply those to our lives today as we attempt to move forward. Okay, that's just a little disclaimer I wanted to put out there. First thing I just want to say also is that people who have been victims of church hurt, I want to acknowledge your pain, because it is very, very real. And it can run from mild pain to very deep hurts that takes years and years and years of intentional healing to eventually get to a place where we may say we have overcome some of those hurts. So church hurt is indeed hurtful. It's painful. It is saddening. It can be depressing. And we want to just give pause and space to be able to say that I understand that your pain is real. Your hurt does hurt. And I think that we have to say that, we have to acknowledge that, and we have to give space to recognize that people have issues that they have had to deal with as a result of church hurt. Okay? But I do want to again look at the woman with the issue of blood, and I'm looking at it from the passage from Mark 5, his version of this miracle that took place when this woman had this encounter with Jesus. One of the things that we look at is the fact that, again, she acknowledged that she had a problem. She knew she had an issue of blood. She had dealt with this for 12 years, so it was a long-standing issue that she's had. And she had gone to multiple doctors. No one was able to help her. She had depleted all of her financial resources, and she was getting worse, not even better. But she purposed in her mind that if I could just get to Jesus, if only I could touch the hem of his garment, she knew that she would be healed. So first of all, this lady, the woman with the issue of blood, she had an issue. People who are hurting and have been hurt, you have an issue. And you're just trying to figure, where can I go to get assistance with this issue that I have? The next thing we look at with her is that she had to find her way through a crowd. There is a crowd around. Everybody is trying to press and get toward Jesus. So even when we're in church, even when we have this issue that we're having to carry around with us, that has been with us for so long that we feel as though it is a part of us, we are having to push through a crowd to get to this destination that we have in mind. For her, it was Jesus in person. For us, it may be trying to get to church to hear a word from God, to be among the community of believers, having to take into consideration that this crowd of believers, we're all human, and therefore we're all flawed, we're imperfect, and we are going to hurt people, not intentionally. We're just flawed. I could get into a whole lot more about that, but I'm going to save that for another focus. What I want to talk about today is just this person, you man, woman, boy, girl, who is a victim of church hurt. You're going to have to deal with a crowd. You will have to deal with a crowd. When we go to church, as I talked about beforehand in the podcast, the church consists of many members. So when we go to church, we're dealing with many members, different people, lots of people. Of course, congregations are of different sizes. So don't know if it's a big crowd, little crowd, medium-sized crowd, doesn't really matter. It's going to be a crowd that we are going to have to deal with. But again, her focus was on, if I could just get to Jesus. So as she is weaving her way through the crowd, trying to get to Jesus, trying to just touch the hem of his garment, she realized that the only way to get to him was going to be to press through this crowd, and her focus was solely on, I'm just trying to get to Jesus. I'm trying to get to Jesus. And I know that there are people who now feel as though they don't have to go to church to get to Jesus. They don't have to go to church to get a word from the Lord. And I'm not disputing that, but I am saying that there is a reason that the church exists. There is scripture that talks about how we should not forsake ourselves, the assembly. So we can't get around those particular scriptures. So how do we reconcile that? So you're going to have to deal with a crowd. Again, you have to remain focused. You have to think to yourself that even in this crowd, all I'm focused on is getting that word from the Lord. What is it that the Lord wants to speak to me through this chosen vessel that is proclaiming this particular message? What is it that I am supposed to get as a result of being here on today? What is this word? And you know, there are many times you can go to church and feel as though God himself is speaking directly to you. He gives you that word that applies to your situation. It is the answer to your question. It is the calm to your fear. And I'm pretty sure that you've had that experience and you know that experience oh so well. So we do have to remember that we have to have focus, and we do sometimes have to press our way through the crowd, even when the crowd may be saying things like, why are you here? And I think about the woman with the issue of blood. Like, what could have been things that could have been said to her? You look funny. You smell funny. Why are you out here? Contaminating other people. Could have been so many things that could have been spoken to her. Could have been so many things that we have to take the chance that may be said to us, but we have to have our focus remained on Jesus and Jesus alone. Okay? And as we know, the story continues, and it talks about the fact that once she was able to touch the hem of her garment, Jesus realized that something left him. Something left him. And even though the disciples were saying, there's a crowd around you, anybody could have touched you, Jesus paused and he said no. He looked around, and we know Jesus is omniscient. So he already knew who had touched him. But he looked around, and the scripture says he saw her. He saw her. And she was trembling. She was afraid. She told him, why is it she touched him? And he said to her, daughter, your faith has saved you. Go in peace and be healed from your affliction. Go and be healed. So we sometimes are going to have to press through a crowd with this issue that we are carrying. It would be easier for us to remain secluded, to determine that we're not going to go over there where that crowd is, where I have been hurt. But the question I think we may have to ask ourselves is, what healing might we miss out on if we don't press our way to Jesus? Okay? Again, I want to acknowledge that church hurt is a real thing. It's a real thing. Jesus acknowledged the fact that she has been afflicted. She has issue. He also acknowledged the fact that she had come through this crowd, that she herself was the one who touched him, not somebody or some random person who happened to brush up against him. He knew there was someone who intentionally reached out to touch him. And he paused. He opened up the space to say, no, somebody specifically has touched me. He looked upon her. So that even enabled the disciples, people who were around him, to be able to say, okay, who is this person? Jesus made space for her. He paused. He saw her. And for you who are victims of church hurt, I want you to know that Jesus will pause. and he will see you. Okay? So acknowledge that hurt. Definitely, if you need to go to counseling or even speaking with someone in spiritual leadership about your hurt, do that. Do not deny yourself those opportunities to be made better. Make sure that you go and you deal with your hurt. And as you're doing that, again, acknowledging that there is this issue that you have. Remember, you're going to have to deal with a crowd when you're dealing with the church. You're going to have to deal with a crowd. You have to remain focused to see what it is that if you continue to press and see what Jesus has for you, you are going to be dealing and pressing through a crowd. So you must remain focused. All right. And then when you are able to touch Jesus, then watch for how he acknowledges that he sees you. Acknowledge how he heals you. Acknowledge how he sends you away in peace. Okay? So I just wanted to come back and just share a little bit more about church hurt. I think if we put ourselves in the woman's shoes, that we will be able to extract from this passage and apply it to our lives to deal with church hurt, understanding again as victims, understanding that it is a thing, it's a real thing. I can't promise that it won't happen even after you go through this process. But what I hope it helps us to keep in mind is to continue to persevere, to see Jesus, even in the crowd. Okay? I am Dr. Monique Smith Gadson, again with Transforming Visions. Thank you so much for coming and visiting with us on today. And I so look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.